comments, a thinking emoji, and if this already feels like something that you're needing to hear, please hit that like button and share. And if it's in the first 7 days, hit hype, because that is the way YouTube knows that this is the kind of content more parents are wanting to see. So let me start with this. A mom I worked with used to have wonderful heart-to-heart relationship with her daughter. They used to talk all the time. Every time there was something new in the friend group, every time there was a difficulty in school, they'd talk. They'd talk through feelings. They'd plan solutions. It all worked great. Until her daughter turned 10, 12, and then all of a sudden, it just wasn't working anymore. And every talk was becoming an argument. And the same loving approach that used to work was leading her daughter to shut down more and more. And nothing changed about the mother's love. Nothing changed about what she was doing, but everything changed about what that love needed to look like for her daughter. And this is often the case, that the love language for our children changes at the point of adolescence. And so let's look at what actually changes when they become teens. So let's unpack it. One of the first things that changes is that when kids are little, they depend on us tremendously. They borrow our nervous system. They need our regulation to be able to find theirs. And so we were the ones who set the anchor to guide, to comfort, to contain. But adolescence is about learning to hold regulation internally. Adolescence is also the time when our teens really start to begin to make meaning on their own. And the ways that we used to like to talk our kids through, they might not be so eager to jump on board because they may honestly not see it the same way. Adolescence is about helping them manage, it's moving from managing their behaviors to modeling steadiness. So a parent used to tell me, you know what, my calm used to actually settle my son down. And it got to the point, though, where if she stayed calm, it actually agitated her son. And he would just roll his eyes and walk off. And that's not failure. That is actually developmental friction. And it is a good indication that it is time for a shift because your teen's meaning-making process has started. And they are no longer depending on you. It is an interdependence that you're creating. And what they lean on is much more indirect than it is direct. The second thing that changes is that we go from compliance to collaboration. There was a time when they were younger where compliance equaled safety. Their ability to obey us equaled our ability to keep them safe from danger. So don't run in the street, brush your teeth, go to bed by a certain time. Now, their job is to differentiate. This is the time for them to be building a greater sense of autonomy and to figure out who they are apart from us. One of the best and most surefire ways to begin to start to identify who you are is to start identifying who you are not. And parents become that first really convenient, not me. So they aren't going to naturally want to comply with you. Parents need to shift into a much more collaborative place. Now, the thing is, as things move forward in adolescence, the stakes go up, which is often what leads parents very much to want their teens to comply with the suggestions they have and so on, because they see that, we see that, parents see that when our kids comply with us, as they're listening to us, they're taking our guidance, and we're being effective as parents. When we demand obedience, though, what our teens hear is that we want to try to control them. When we demand obedience, what they hear is we're not comfortable with them starting to take more ownership of their lives. So think about the 15-year-old who, at the sight of any limit, any rule, they question every rule. And the parent is thinking, my God, what is this disrespect? If you can understand this developmental shift, that they are moving more towards their identity development and sense of autonomy, you will understand that the pushing up comes with the territory. It's part of how they exercise their sense of self. They're testing where your rules end and where they begin. So this is the work of identity, and we need to be helping them support their sense of autonomy. The next shift that we have to make is from protection to preparation. When your child was small, you protected them from all kinds of danger, but now your role is to prepare them to navigate danger on their own. You can't bubble wrap a teen into adulthood. You can't make through obedience a teen move into maturation. The goal is not to keep them from falling. It's to help them build resilience, mastery, and self-efficacy so that we can walk with them and help them. And in those times when they fall, help them with recovering. So many times we can get so hell-bent on needing the perfect outcome that we end up conveying to our teens an anxiety about things being less than perfect. That leads them to be anxious about things being less than perfect. And what we are needing teens to do more and more of as they get older is to get comfortable making choices, which means getting more comfortable in their skin and with the possibility that they'll make mistakes, and that mistakes are just a process of learning and part of that recovery. I had a dad who would micromanage his son's homework every night, and he would say to me, I just want him to succeed. But what would happen is that because the father was taking so much ownership of the homework, his son's investment in the homework went down because he knew his dad was going to stay on top of it anyways. And so every time his dad tried to get involved, either the son would become very passive or he would get really angry and say, I don't know why you're trying to take control of this. It's like you don't trust me. So put a check in the chat or in the comments if you're watching this as a rerun, if you've noticed that your teen resists the things that used to motivate them. Comment down below if you noticed that they now resist the things that you used to suggest. And if this is resonating, please hit that like button because that's how YouTube knows to help get this to more parents. All right, so what happens if we don't make that shift? When parents keep doing too much, reminding, rescuing, and over-explaining, it tends to lead to a dysfunctional kind of loop where the parent overfunctions on behalf of the teen. The teen, in their moment of autonomy and differentiation, tunes out or gets defensive. What happens is the parent feels disrespected and then tends to double down. And in the face of this doubling down, the teen, again, is either engaging in behavior that the parent sees as disrespectful or as passive. And again, it leads to more overfunctioning. And so the cycle helps it sort of feeds itself. And underneath the loop is a message to teens, fundamentally, that we don't believe you can handle it. Hence our micromanaging. So think about a son, or think about a mom who texts her son 5, 6, 7 times about a missing assignment. And finally, he replies, stop, stop. And she interprets it as attitude. What's really happening is he's drowning in his own sense of overwhelm and just needs her to back off long enough for him to make some decisions. Oftentimes, our teens just need the space within which to then exercise their choice. The opposite of this is underfunctioning. Parents who just emotionally check out. And they say, in the name of giving them space, they just totally withdraw. And what ends up happening is the teen experiences this as us not caring enough to show up. And so when parents do this, they tend to do it to avoid conflict. They say, I'm sick of fighting, so I'm just letting it go. What can often happen, though, is that teens will escalate their behavior in order to gain a kind of sense of connection. Even though it may set off chaos, it is amazing what our teens will do to get us to show up. And if you have a tendency to underfunction or to show up less or to be a little bit emotionally distant, this is going to be one of those challenges for you to step forward into your discomfort. A father once said to me, my daughter only talks to me when she needs something. And I asked him, well, when do you talk to her about stuff that isn't about stuff she hasn't done? And that became a real moment for that parent to really stop and to think. So drop in the chat now or in the comments, which loop do you tend to find yourself more in? The overdoing, overfunctioning side or the underfunctioning side? If this part is hitting home, please hit share so that this can get to more parents. All right, so how do we start parenting differently when everything in us just wants to fix, explain, or retreat out of comfort? So one of the first things is that we have to move from fixing to guiding. When our teens struggle, our instinct always is to jump in, typically, and fix. Us Gen Xers, Zennial parents especially, we have been looking forward to this journey with our kids, especially thinking about our own experiences growing up. And so it is about not just jumping in, though, because when we just jump in and take over, it communicates that we believe they can't handle it. Guiding would be more like, what part of this do you want help with? This prompt encourages them to start thinking about, number one, the problem or whatever situation they're in being theirs. Number two, it implicitly also starts to set up encouragement of them to think about the process of seeking help. And third, it also marks the parent then as someone who can be helpful. So if the parent says, hey, look, it looks like you're having a rough day. If there's anything that you need help with, just let me know. I'll be in the kitchen. That then marks where the problem becomes the teens. It also lets the teen know where to find you as the parent to initiate bringing you in for help. These sound like time-consuming, there's just too much at stake. We can't afford to slow things down so that we have this kind of communication. Yet, this shift is so important because if you cannot signal to your teen that you acknowledge whose life it is and that they are gaining more and more ownership of it, they are immediately going to take anything that you're doing in terms of fixing as just an attempt to control them, and it will lead to greater conflict and disconnection. So it was really interesting because what starts to happen is that kids will start speaking up. And so, for example, one son finally said to his mom, please text me once. When you text me 10 times, it just feels bad. That was huge progress for them. That only started because the mom started backing up and could start to hear her son more. Okay, the second shift is from moving from monitoring to mentoring. Monitoring tends to be about control, knowing everything. And this is the other place where it comes into play for parents. Parents, when we're really wanting to make sure we're being thorough, that tends to be when we get into monitoring mode. And it becomes a slippery slope because as soon as they feel any sense of control, that creates an immediate point of disconnection with your teen. Mentoring is about influence. Mentoring is you becoming Gandalf on the hill, being someone that your teen actually wants to listen to. And the first start to that is by relinquishing your need to tell them what to do about everything and to be open to hearing more where they're coming from and offering them kind of your observation of what you see and then again offering of help. So you may say to your teen, you seem off a bit lately. Is there something going on? Teen might say, I really don't want to talk about it. You can say in response, okay, that's fine. Look, just know I'm here. If you change your mind, I'll be wherever. And you let them know where you'll be. The third shift is that we need to move from just staying calm to actually being clear. One of the ways we play our steady role is by being very clear about our expectations and the limits that we're holding our teen to. Oftentimes, we wish that this would be the really collaborative part where collaboration means the teen agrees with the limits that we have, that the teen understands them and appreciates them. Most of the time in reality, teens aren't going to appreciate the limits that we set. They're not going to like them. That's okay. We still need to set the limits that we need to set. Clarity says, I love you, and this is what I'm willing to participate in and what I'm not willing to participate in. Clarity says, I love you, and this is what I expect of you. So when your teen slams the door or says, just shut up and snaps at you like that, it isn't for you to just say, okay, well, I'm sorry you're having a bad day. No, it's to say, whoa, ouch, looks like you're having a bad day. I'm not okay having you talk to me this way. So if you're calmer, when you're calmer, I'm happy to continue this conversation with you. So again, it's not just calm. It's not just faking calmness. It is actually authentically being grounded enough so that you can stay clear. In other words, calm is in the function of being more clear. It isn't to just go along to get along. All right, so let's name the shifts or the obstacles that get in the way of parents making this shift, because honestly, it's very, very rarely. I have yet to see it be a lack of love. Parents never get to the problematic places they get to with their teens because they think to themselves, how can I screw my kids over most effectively? We only get to the places we get to with our kids out of the most sincere, intense love and our belief that we are doing the best. And so it's rarely a lack of love that gets in the way. Rather, it tends to be fear, guilt, and difficulties with self-regulation. All right, so one of the first myths that parents hold, or one of the fears they hold rather, is that if they start to move back, they're going to lose all control and everything is going to fall apart. And catastrophic thinking can start taking hold then. But here's the truth. Things tend to fall apart, and our feeling of things becoming more and more chaotic tends to happen when we are gripping too tightly. Influence is always stronger than control. And teens follow the parents they trust, not the ones who win the arguments. So there is a huge difference between being right and being effective. And when you're trying to influence your teen, you might be arguing why you are right. Being right is not the point. Your teen is in the process of finding their own way of coming to what is their version of the right answer. We do better when we influence their path to that answer, not the specific answer. So influence, always stronger than control. The second obstacle tends to be guilt and then resulting overcompensation. Most of us parents of teens, we're not in ideal situations. Most of us are also dealing with helping aging parents, raising other children in the house, having work demands. And in all of these things, when things are less than ideal, or there are other circumstances such as marital discord, divorce, trauma, there can be a tendency then on the part of the parent to overcompensate and to overgive and to overcontrol. This can also happen when teens have struggled or are struggling with mental health issues, because there is such a need for parents to step up a little bit more. And so here's something to keep in mind, is that it is always an ongoing tension between overdoing and underdoing. We're always navigating that, and there's never just one sweet spot. It's a place that we need to be constantly monitoring and assessing for ourselves. So, overfunctioning is often a love story told in the language of fear. Bottom line, when you can begin to step back and to let go of a little of control and to not feel like you're trying to make up for stuff that you haven't been able to do, you will be amazed at how much things will actually settle down. Because when you're overcompensating out of guilt, you're coming from your fundamental place as a parent of feeling like you have failed already. So that is just not a good starting point to enter into any kind of attempt at connecting or fostering connection. This is one place where parents need to do a tremendous amount of personal healing, because honestly, it is a reality, and it has to be okay that we as parents can't do it all. We're going to fall short in some places. And here's the thing, our teens are robust enough. And when that connection is in play, when we fall short, there is still room in the relationship, in this collaborative partnership, for mistakes to happen, for resilience to build, for self-efficacy and mastery to also increase. Now, along with guilt and overcompensation then, is the third obstacle, which is emotion dysregulation, just personally for yourself. It is very hard to bear witness to some of the very challenging lessons that our teens have to learn about relationships, about priorities, about time management, about dreaming and aiming and falling short and getting back on the horse. All of these things can be incredibly triggering to watch. Then add on top of that teen moodiness, volatility, behavior that's erratic. You can get spun around real fast. And so our own reactions can start to get super big in response, because our own feelings are sort of larger than life for us. So the work then becomes on helping ourselves learn how to reground, how to anchor ourselves, and to stay steady. And some of these things require challenging beliefs you may have about what it means to be a parent, what your job is a parent. So this is my goal in this talk, is to help open up a different way for you to be thinking about your role. because it isn't about delivering to your child a perfect life. Quite honestly, that's quite impossible. Quite impossible. And so let's end with some concrete steps on how we can actually shift things. And before we jump to that, what one do you notice in yourself about obstacles? Is it guilt? Is it fear? Is it your own personal dysregulation? Which one is the one that you struggle with the most? Or maybe it's a mix. Okay, so in terms of concrete steps that you can end with today, all right, that you can start with today, is number one, name what's actually changing. Acknowledge for yourself right now that your role is shifting, that your teen's love language has also shifted as a result of their movement into adolescence. When you stop fighting the transition, you can start actually adjusting to it. The second thing that you can do is to hold limits with warmth. Limits and boundaries don't have to be something that are delivered with anger. That is a piece of residue from old school parenting, where there used to be this feeling that if you really conveyed how angry you were, the anger of the parent would be prevention reason enough for the teen to avoid the thing. What anger does is it just increases disconnection. We maintain steadiness and a steady connection when we can hold our limits with warmth, when we can understand a challenge to a limit isn't just them trying to be difficult. That's their developmental process of identity formation. It's their brain in the process of expansion. And so the more warm we can be, the more they feel supported. That it's not a huge deal if they get the limits wrong because it can be fixed, it can be addressed. The third thing is to practice micro repair. Sometimes we can get super overwhelmed into thinking that we have to be able to fix the whole thing and have that almost bliss-like union that used to be there when our kids were super little. And you know what? That's just not how human relationships work. And the cool thing is, when your child moves into adolescence, they're starting to come into their identity from which they can start to have their first full-fledged relationship with you as the parent. It is the chance for the first time in our kids' lives that they're having a choice about how they want to lean on us, where they want to make use of us. We can practice micro repair. So let's say that you've been super controlling and micromanaging. You can always just say to your teen, I know I've been really on top of you lately, and I realize I've just missed that we're in a totally different phase. So you'll notice I'm just going to start some small changes starting now. Instead of bugging you to tell me about your day at school, I'm just going to say I'm here. And if you want to share with me, let me know. Small things. So start somewhere concrete. And the fourth thing is to seek support. We're not meant to parent in isolation, and there is just this weird thing that happens when it comes to parenting teens. As parents of little kids, we're very open to talk about the challenges we're having in parenting, but once the challenges start happening with our children who are in adolescence or young adulthood, new things like shame start to come up, things like feeling like we need to protect the privacy of our teens, so therefore we don't let any of our friends or family know what's going on for us either. It only will escalate dysregulation on your part, that hiding. And so one of the biggest antidotes to shame is to show yourself. Because there is no shame in the challenges that you might be having with your teen, because most parents are having these struggles. A lot of us, we thought, especially if you were into gentle parenting for that first half, we thought that if we did the right things, that somehow we would get to adolescence with our kids and it would be a walk in the park. And it turns out that it's not so simple. So seek support, whether it's friends who you can actually be honest with, not compete with, whether it's a church group, whether it's a support group, whether it's through a parent coach or through therapy. Do something to seek support. So think, what is one shift that you are ready to make starting today that you will implement this week? Comment down below. When you name it, it helps you hold yourself accountable, and it helps other parents see that there are parents who are working on it too. So the unspoken shift at adolescence is this: your authority no longer comes from being in charge. It comes from being in relationship. And you're not losing your influence. You're learning to use it differently. And so this isn't about failure. It's about learning to evolve alongside your teen. So if you want a step-by-step way of building this kind of clarity and connection, check out my online course, From Chaos to Clarity. It's designed to walk you through these shifts in detail, and you can find that link on my channel homepage. And so before you go, hit like, hit hype, share this live with one parent who's questioning if they're doing enough, because maybe what they need isn't more effort, but just a different stance and a different place to come from. So no fear, no shame, just the truth. All right, guys, I will see you next time. Thank you for joining.